a few years ago. It's no longer in existence. This is a little bit of a different concept. Just a little quick introduction. I am a radio and television producer and host, and I am also a writer. I've been a journalist for a long time. I'm a photographer, filmmaker. So that sounds like a lot, but they're all tied in together. And I have been doing live streaming in one way or another for many, many years, probably since the early 2000s. And I'll get into that a little bit later if you're ever interested. But suffice it to say, I've been away from live streaming for some time. So I'm just coming back, and I'm saying Happy Easter because this channel is really about the miraculous, amazing life that we have through Jesus Christ. And that because he actually was resurrected, a lot of people go around with their crosses and they forget that Jesus actually rose again on the third day. Or maybe they don't even really recognize that, but we have to say that the cross is empty. He's not there, but he's also not in the tomb where he was buried. And this is just a little kind of a reaction video to commemorate Easter and to say Happy Easter to you and to introduce you to the channel. There's going to be a lot of different things that we're going to be doing, not the least of which is having groups of people talking about some of the miracles in their own life, some of the healings, and also inviting our audience to be part of that in really unique kind of ways. I think, and I think they're unique, and so this is just my way of sort of doing the inaugural welcome to the channel, and I really hope that you will enjoy some of the offerings that we have here. And I'm not doing anything too challenging today because it's just me on my own, and I just felt like Easter was a perfect day to welcome you to Inconceivable Love. And I'm going to start this little video. I'm going to be putting my headset on and watching these guys along with you. Oop. I think. See? Can't go perfectly.
Let's get to the heart of this conversation. There is a sighting, a Jesus sighting that happened about 2,000 years ago, and they say the tomb is empty. What evidence do we have today that gives us confidence that the resurrection is a historical fact?
So there's at least 20 to 21 arguments for the empty tomb that cumulatively make a powerful case. One of the most compelling is in regards to who discovered the empty tomb. Now, all four Gospels report that women discovered the empty tomb. We read that in our modern culture, and we don't think twice about it. But in that patriarchal culture, a woman was typically not educated the same way as a man. In fact, there's some ancient Jewish proverbs, not in the scriptures, that says, better the words of the law burnt than delivered to women. They were looked down upon. And so put yourself in the position of the gospel writers. If they're inventing a story of an empty tomb and they want to convince people that this is true, who are the least likely witnesses they would invent, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, to be persuasive?
Yeah, that is a point, and something that I wanted to mention. I know it's difficult in our culture, and it's actually kind of offensive in a certain way for people to think about women being treated in this way, but it was just the reality. So for the gospel writers to make up a story that involves women getting to the tomb first and finding out about it being empty is, or even to talk about the fact that Mary was the first one to see Jesus, just, it wouldn't go that way in that culture. And so I find this a really interesting thing. It's very hard for us to take on board, but I'm speaking as a woman here, that it's okay. Just keep on listening and it will all become clear to you.
Answers, they obviously wouldn't invent women. That would be counterproductive. So the reason they report women, the most likely reason, is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John heard a story that they believe, and they're passing on what they think is true. So that's one reason that it's kind of called the criterion of embarrassment, that people don't invent material to intentionally embarrass themselves and disparage their message. So when writers include that, it's because they care more about truth than the perception. So women discovering the empty tombs is very, very significant. There's more than this. Another one I think is interesting is that Jesus was buried in Jerusalem. Now, what's interesting about this is if you're going to go invent a story that's not true, the hardest place to do this would be in Jerusalem, because somebody would say, okay, wait a minute, we actually know Joseph of Arimathea. We know the name of the person who had the tomb that buried Jesus. That's pretty amazing 2,000 years later. And his position of authority. They just go check his tomb and see if the body was there. But they don't. Why? Because the body's gone. So the apostles go preach the risen Jesus in Jerusalem, the very city Jesus was publicly crucified and buried in a known tomb, minimally shows incredible confidence that the tomb itself was empty. That's the second one. I'll give you a third one as quickly. It's the first explanation.
Okay, before we go into the third one, sorry, I'm just having a little bit of a problem with my headphones. I'm taking them off. So this is a really interesting one to me, because just the idea that they went ahead and started preaching an empty tomb. First of all, they had to believe the women. Then they had to go down there, take a look for themselves. Remember that it was being guarded by the Roman soldiers. Very careful, because they thought that for sure the disciples were going to go steal that body. And so there's a whole bunch of preparations and things that were done to make sure that that didn't happen. And what he's going to say next is really, really interesting when you think about the politics around this. And we can all understand politics, that it becomes very convoluted, and it becomes very difficult for some of the leaders to be covering this up. Listen to what he says next.
Explanation for the empty tomb is that the religious leaders say that the apostles stole the body. That's the explanation. If they say they stole the body, what are they assuming about the state of the tomb?
That it's empty.
That it's empty, right? You don't say to your teacher something like, my dog ate my homework, if you have your homework. So the first explanation from the religious leaders is the apostles stole the body, which shows that the body was gone and the tomb was empty. Now, we could talk about whether or not it's reasonable for the apostles to steal their body, and I mainly think it's not reasonable because, number one, they had to get by the guard, but number two, why would they go out and willingly suffer and be willing to die for something if they stole a body and knew it was false? So I think when we start to piece some of these things together, there's reasons why some of the greatest journalists, greatest historians, greatest lawyers and thinkers of all time have stopped and been like, wow, there's a powerful case that Jesus lived, died, buried, and appeared to people on the third day.
And
yeah, so these are the things that when people talk about their not even being an historical Jesus, there's no doubt that Jesus actually lived. And whether it's Josephus or whether it's all of the different contemporaneous people who actually knew him and saw him, plus the fact that he actually appeared to 500 people after he died and was resurrected. So there's, and people say, well, you know, it was, they were just seeing hallucinations. You can't have an hallucination with 500 people. It just doesn't work that way. One person can have an hallucination. Maybe another person can actually catch it from them, or they can, you know, try to push it. But the thing is, why would they want to do this? Because it was compromising everything in their life. They weren't able to work. They were being persecuted. And some of them actually died incredible deaths for their faith. And I will mention that one of those is James, the brother of Jesus, who during Jesus' life thought he was crazy. It says it in the Bible, the family thought he was nuts, going around talking about how he was the Son of God. So there's just so much in the way of embarrassment, as he talks about earlier, that people have to go back and say, well, maybe, yeah, like I did actually tease him his entire life. I bugged him about what he was saying. So, and James is one of the people who, as I mentioned, just died a horrendous death because of his belief. And it wasn't just because he was his brother. So we're just going to finish this up. It's very short, and I won't interrupt again.
And isn't it true that it's not only in the Bible that we read about Jesus living, dying, being buried, and being seen after he died, but that's also attested to by non-Christian contemporary historians during that time?
So some of those facts, yes. Now, I know you're not implying this, but when skeptics say to me, well, what about outside the Bible? There's kind of an assumption that we can't trust the Bible. I'm telling you, Kirk, if we had none of these other sources, I still think we can trust the accounts in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and other early Christian historians to have confidence that it's true.
Yes, so do I.
With that said, when we go outside of the scriptures, you have writers like Josephus at the end of the 1st century that affirm the existence of Jesus.
And who's Josephus?
Josephus was a Jewish writer writing on behalf of the Romans in the 90s.
Not a Christian.
He was not a Christian, no. And so he gives basic facts. Jesus, the brother of James, Jesus lived, he was died, there's reports that he's the Messiah. He doesn't give all the details, but he tells details that help support and corroborate the accounts within the Gospels. You get in the 2nd century, you have writers like Tacitus, who's a Roman historian, and he also points to the existence of Pontius Pilate, the death of Jesus, the persecution of early Christians. You find these extra biblical sources. And by the way, there's not a ton of extra biblical sources on anything in that time period at that time. So the fact that they would even talk about Jesus, who's a religious leader in a small corner of the empire that didn't have any political power anyways, is significant. So there are some non-Christian sources that are relatively early that help strengthen the case that we're talking about.
Hi, I'm Kirk Cameron, and thanks for watching the Kirk Cameron on TBN YouTube channel.
I thought I'd mention that, or just let him mention that, because I think it's important to give credit where credit is due. Kirk Cameron has his own channel, and you can see that here in behind me. And I really recommend his channel. Some people remember him from Growing Pains, and I think it's really amazing the ministry that he has. He started working with Ray Comfort, who some of you may know, and he has gone on to do his own work and to have his own channel. They did a show called The Way of the Master, which I'm listening to the audiobook, and we will be talking about some of those other things as well. And I'm excited about all the different things that we're going to be doing on this channel, my friends and I. And so we're actually even going to be doing some of our meetings, like our prayer meetings and our healing times. And if you need healing, if you need prayer, this is going to be part of the ministry so that we can do it in real time, and we can offer that to people who are in need right now. There are so many people in my own life, and I know there are many, many people in other people's lives, and this is just a way that I can reach out and help people who may not have a community of believers in their own area, or who may not be believers and who may really just need to know more about the Lord and know more about Jesus and his sacrifice. Amazing that he came down to earth to be part of humanity, to experience everything that we've experienced. So anybody that talks about how God doesn't understand our suffering, God understands our suffering. He suffered. He died on a cross. He was scourged, which means that he was whipped and whipped and whipped. And just if you read the account of what happened when he went to the cross, even, and spat upon and humiliated and not believed, anything that we've experienced in our life, he experienced while he was here on earth. And that was the sacrifice that he made for us because of his inconceivable love, which is the name of this channel. And the things that we're going to be doing are really focused on that, the inconceivable love of Christ and the inconceivable love that we can have for one another through Christ, not through our own effort, nothing to do with us. everything to do with him. So with that, I'm going to play my little intro extra, and I'm going to say Happy Easter, and thank you so much for checking out the channel, and I hope you come back and see about some of the other amazing things that we have in store for you. And so until then, I'm going to say goodbye and Happy Easter.